So welcome to another episode of the occasional, but every episode is an occasion, Datnexa Podcast. And today, after talking to Patrick last time, we thought we'd segue very neatly into Jane Fisher, who joins us today, who I'm not even going to try to attempt to explain what it is that she does that is so marvellous, but it truly is. And it's focused around being a practitioner who brings a lot more of the natural environment, almost the third aspect of our working from home and office world, into sharp focus in two incredible contexts. One of them is kind of the piece of well-being, productivity, and I guess kind of like human performance around it.
Absolutely.
And then the other thing that we're super interested in is the fact that it's really innovative and it's a great counterbalance to AI. So, there's a lot going on here, and thank you so much for coming along.
You're very welcome. Thank you for having me.
If I could ask you to kind of kick off and just explain your practice and kind of how it may differ from things that are preconceptions people may have of what it is that you do.
Okay, so for 12 years, whilst running my sort of consultancy and coaching business, I used this traditional ways of working, was maybe in the offices, in workspaces, in seminar rooms, wherever the work actually took me. And then a couple of years ago, I diversified how I approached that. It followed a health issue, and I decided to bring in the outdoors to facilitate my working. So whether that was through my coaching, whether it was through my strategic work, the outdoors became my co-facilitator, and that really just sent the magic through the air and the impact that actually had. And it's been totally transformational ever since.
That is amazing. I love that idea of being able to collaborate with the great outdoors.
Absolutely.
I think it's something that intuitively makes sense. I mean, like our environment and kind of the environmental factors that we find ourselves in affect, things like it's hard to work in a noisy environment, for instance. It can be, kind of like if you're constantly being interrupted, there's that. It's hard to be inspired if you're working in kind of a small cubicle or things like that. So it makes absolute sense that you've got the environment, and kind of the great outdoors playing that part. Are there similar sorts of benefits in terms of moving and kind of, people doing something in the outdoors as well?
Yeah, so if we consider the impact of being outdoors, so initially, if you think about what we often do, I've seen boards or senior leadership teams go from, we're having an away day, we're going from this office and we're going to this wonderful hotel. But actually all we're doing is moving from one white-walled room to another with obviously limited space. That really actually limits our thinking, becomes quite constrictive. But once you start to take yourselves outdoors, it actually triggers different parts of the brain to start to operate. Because when we're in the offices, we're very much focused. Our attention is very much focused on the work we're doing, on screens, on people, as you mentioned, the interruptions going on, constantly making decisions, one here, there, and everywhere. And actually, it's a bit like the Duracell bunny. It goes for so long, but actually it will gradually fade. So if we look at actually how we can restore that, then by going outdoors, that can actually, it triggers a different part of the brain for our thinking. It's much more relaxed, and therefore we start to recover. So it's called the attention restoration theory. But also, whilst we're outdoors, just how we think changes. The creativity comes in, and research shows that being outdoors and walking outdoors actually multiplies the impact. So it can actually increase our creativity by 60%. Now, when you think about creativity, often people think about artistry, but it isn't that. This is about how we see problems, how we look at the solutions, how we interpret that, exploring how they're all connected, how people maybe be responding. So that creativity, that innovation, how we're thinking is really important. And Oprezzo and Schwartz, I think it was, Stanford University, did a lot of research on that and identified that statistic. So very powerful indeed.
And I think it's that nicely kind of ties into some of the thinking around AI as well, where we've kind of seen, from our own like lived experience as practitioners, but also the research that appears to be happening the research that is happening, the appearance is, so I should say, that there are three main areas where humans outperform the machines consistently. And that is in critical thinking.
Yes.
Creativity.
Yes.
Like genuine creativity and human connection. Yeah. And those three things. And it's funny that actually what you've just described is a great environment and process to really reinforce and explore those three things. What's super impressive about those three elements is they're known as the humics.
Oh.
And they were coined by Aristotle.
Wow.
So it is actually something really fundamental in terms of how things fit together. On the creativity point, I think there's a lot to be said, because what you kind of see with a lot of the AI stuff is that it is kind of creative, but within fixed boundaries.
Yes.
So it's often quite derivative. And where there is creativity, it's because it's come up with so many different permutations of things that all of a sudden it kind of clicks, and then that's seen as a creative leap. But it's also very good at what I'd call like more derivative sort of art.
Yes.
So if you think about, and I think the internet overall has that piece to it, where you may see songs from one era done in the style of another.
Yeah.
Now that's super popular, but an AI is really good at that, because it's really good. It's got the source material for one and the full context for the other, and it can put those together quite quickly and to a very high standard. But is that actually genuinely creative? Is that the spark that develops a new genre of music or something like that? So I think things that help emphasize what it is that the humans do better than anything else is to be celebrated. And you're quite right that it isn't, creativity is just so applicable to so much that we do. That isn't being artistic, that isn't being, kind of like I'm a creative. It's more, how do you come up with new and novel ways of doing things at periods of great change, which we're going through at this point in time? Definitely. Is kind of a key part of I think achieving and kind of delivering whatever it is that you're seeking to do. With that sort of piece of the outdoors, is there anything about human connection that's worth talking about? That kind of, is being grounded in the outdoors a good way of being grounded in oneself or with others, or kind of what's kind of flow there sort of thing?
Well, from my experience, and I think from other practitioners that use the outdoors as well, is that we find that the conversation absolutely changes. What is really great is when you take, teams and they're from different positions in the organization, hierarchy disappears.
Oh, interesting.
And therefore you have the ability to have much better conversations. The fear of saying things seems to disappear. There's that greater connection between individuals. And I think part of that is because if you think about being inside the office, for example, or even on a screen, in our virtual world, you are basically eye to eye with somebody, and that can be actually quite intimidating for some people. If you're actually walking side by side, you don't have any of that. And you can talk freely. As I say, there's no hierarchy. There becomes a deeper connection. And people tend to be much more open with what they're saying. And therefore, going back to creativity, people are not afraid to share their thoughts in the same way and their ideas. I can think back to years gone by. I did a lot of strategic leadership in the public sector, for example, responsible for implementing national policy at grassroots level. But there'd have been occasions where I'd go into a room or be around this, meeting thinking, I had a great idea, but suddenly felt hesitant to actually mention it. Because then again, they're just going to think I'm totally wacky or it's a bit crazy. But there again, then you discover about 15 minutes later, somebody actually pops up with your ideas and you're thinking, why didn't I actually say that? But, you know, we're all human beings and we all have our inhibitions. It doesn't matter actually what level we're at. Sometimes it's that imposter syndrome, as we call it. But being outdoors, those inhibitions seem to disappear. And therefore, you know, that's when the blue sky thinking really comes to the fore. And these, what might seem crazy ideas, actually there's an element of truth in them. And although they might be a bit crazy up here, when you start to peel them back, there's a nugget of truth in that. Yeah. And you can actually find a really great solution through that conversation. So walking alongside, being outdoors, you know, that soft fascination by nature around us, whether that's the clouds moving, whether it's the water you can hear, or you know, just the views that you see, triggers something really quite magical about human connection, which I don't believe you can get through a virtual screen or even sat opposite one another.
It's the so you kind of go along to places that are like Imagineering spaces, and you kind of, and it's funny, they're just trying to recreate something that's quite a varied natural environment inside a very clinical sort of cube or box or something. The idea of, there's a couple of things in there that are really, really interesting in terms of how we've seen this sort of design process shift. And it's been the case for a long time that good design is diverse design, is good design. In the way that, you know, with websites, there was a real tipping point when you had more people around the table designing websites.
Yeah.
And they went from being black screens with like neon green or white text.
I remember those days.
And then and it was like, oh, we can have a white background, and then we can do all this other stuff, or we can have, you know, like a teal background or whatever it is that you're working on. And then there's this idea that diverse opinion is actually better in terms of like business performance. Diverse boards often outperform non-diverse boards by about 30% in terms of like share price. So this idea of getting everyone around the table to design is important, but that's only part of it. Getting everyone in around the table to design is theatre, unless you let everyone speak and also ensure that everyone is able and comfortable to speak. And that's kind of the key. So we do a lot of work with like educating people about the words that we use and like AI and stuff like that. So when they're in that meeting, they can be like, oh yeah, no, I know what that is, and my view on it is X or Y or whatever. So anything that kind of takes that sort of process and facilitates it or accelerates it is going to be a good thing. Yeah. And also the idea of hierarchy, you know, with a lot of the AI tooling that we're looking at, it's delivered and used at the front line. Yes. And actually making sure it works at that level is as important as the kind of the centralized tasks of making sure that it's secure or it's, you know, kind of like scalable or repeatable or things like that. But in that process of moving from the central to the decentralized, there's actually a huge amount of value. And there's a lot of things that people can learn, but also there's a lot of commercial value if you're looking at a commercial entity. And actually for public sector, it's really interesting because it unlocks a sort of sense of sovereignty. Like, we're going to take this central big stuff here, but in making it ours, we own that.
Yes.
And that's so important. And I think kind of, again, ties into a sense of people and place, which a lot of local authorities, for instance, kind of have that. Have you kind of, have you had experience of kind of using place to help people make decisions and design things? And how do you do that so it lands and it's like a meaningful process?
Yeah, so what we're trying, so I'm based in the Northumberland, so I'm blessed with absolutely gorgeous countryside on my doorstep. Although I'm going to add that you don't need to live in the countryside or anywhere like that to actually benefit from any of this.
Yeah.
Inner city London, Newcastle, Durham, wherever it actually is, there are always green spaces and there are always the blue spaces as well. So you can get this in micro doses wherever. So I'm going to add that. However, when I consider the work that I'm doing, at the moment I'm working with a colleague and we're calling them connected conversations, basically. So they're aimed at the public sector. And in the public sector, having worked in that, as you mentioned, sometimes the situations are really complex, but place is that central core bit that holds everybody together. So through these connected conversations, it's about bringing like-minded people from the different sectors, but they're all focused around the same place, the same challenge.
Yeah.
But they're challenges that you can't solve alone. You need cross-collaboration going on. And therefore, by bringing people together and facilitating that conversation whilst walking, because as I just said, walking removes the barriers, it removes the hierarchy, it removes all those barriers to effective conversations and solution finding, so that we can, there may be 90-minute walks, but the idea is we have the questions that we're going to explore on that walk, and at intervals, it's about regrouping people and maybe changing colleagues that you're going to walk with to explore the challenge a little bit further. So it is very much about facilitating people coming together, exploring the same challenge, but from a different perspective. And then maybe all those fresh ideas, that diverse thinking, not the silo thinking, the group think that can really happen in individual organizations and particularly in certain sectors. But this just broadens it out so that I call it the magic, or sometimes I call it popping candy, because ideas pop and you get that from great conversation, but sometimes that needs to be facilitated. And that's what I find by taking people outdoors. It actually does. And it doesn't matter about the weather. I'm going to add that.
It's quite, that's
a mindset issue.
Yeah, but it is nicer if it's sunny.
It is nicer if it's sunny, but do you know what? When you get a bit of rain and some wind on your face, it's actually, it really stimulates even further. And I think we forget that the refreshingness and the impact on our senses actually adds another dimension as well. And how people feel so great afterwards. It
is. I mean, I think the Finnish have a word for when you come back into a warm room after being out in the cold, and how great that feels, because that sense of achievement, that entire sensation is kind of like tied up into something.
But I have to say, weather becomes the typical barrier, and I have these conversations because I really have to kick hard to break that status quo in organisations, in businesses, in different sectors, in the fact that the UK weather's not that good, is it? And I'm thinking, it isn't actually the weather that's the problem. It's our mindset. If we've got that mindset in an organisation, in a business, wherever we are, how on earth do we expect to actually move forward when we've got challenges ahead? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, no, that is interesting. It's, so much of the time we spend a lot of time thinking about resilience and, how to introduce it. And it's the saying of there's no such thing as bad weather, just bad clothes. Clothing. Yeah. And if you're prepared enough, you can kind of cope with it. Or as you say, mindset's important.
Yeah.
That is fascinating. Also, there was something you said and it made me think of something and then I forgot it. But, actually, that was it. I think in a way, I think intuitively, there's a lot of sense, and it does, getting people outside, working outside, or using that environment when appropriate to, help foster creativity and bring people together. But I think too often it's kind of assumed as like a nice to have, a bolt on, or kind of not as a. If you think about like health and safety legislation about the physical office, that's a very serious thing, and rightly so. Do you feel that it's kind of, people don't understand how serious or how important or how critical this could be, because it's new, it's novel, and it's kind of misunderstood or, kind of seen from, in the wrong light sort of thing.
Yeah, I think part of the issue is that when people say go outdoors, the initial response is, going off, bit of a perk, or it's a bit of a jolly, never going to get actually anything done. And actually that's a really misconstrued really, is about what the actual benefits are. Because, everybody talks about the outdoors as this wellness, the impact on wellness, and therefore maybe it's the wellness perk. But actually, if you dig deeper, wellness is actually just the tip of the iceberg. if you go underneath that iceberg, what senior leaders don't recognize is the fact that it is a performance tool. Because we've talked about the creativity, we've talked about connection, the fact that it's absolutely brilliant for helping teams to build that connection together, work better together. It's better for breaking down those hierarchies. But even things like productivity, if you look at during the day, our productivity goes down. Every time we get interrupted, our productivity dips. And over the day, productivity is just diminishing all the time because we're just bombarded. I mean, leaders in particular making decisions left, right, and centre. And they just, there is something called decision fatigue. At the end of the day, it's real. Therefore, even 5-10 minutes break before you make a big decision, go outside, walk around the block. They're not, I call them I call it like habits. They're micro habits. It's not about yumping on the hills all the time. It is literally about, you can walk around the block, you can walk down the river, you can go into a little park and just have that break. But the impact on people in your organisation is multiple. Even the evidence shows that, if you have greater satisfaction in your staff members, they'll be happier. Retention will go up. You're not going to have to spend more on recruitment. Their engagement goes up. Their well-being is better. Therefore, they're not office sick.
Yeah.
And that's why I call it the third branch of hybrid working. It should be embraced in the same way. And people, where possible, have a degree of autonomy to be able to choose that, whether it's taking a phone call outside, maybe it's a one-to-one that's being had outside. We're not talking hours at a time. We're actually talking about, minutes maybe, and even having team meetings outside. People might think it's a bit radical. And what's the other? I talked about the weather, about being the classic statement.
Yeah.
The other one is, I haven't got time to do that. And I'm thinking, no, you haven't actually got time not to do that, because you save time in the long run. And this is the bit people don't recognise, is that by doing this, you make better decisions, less likely that it's going to be the wrong decision that's going to cost further money and issues further down the line. You're interpreting the data far better. AI is brilliant for that information, the data analysis and everything, but we're still going to make a decision over whether we're going to use it. So given that reflective space, the analysis and the human context to it is really powerful. And it's, it gives better accuracy in that decision making, and therefore addressing the accountability issues. Because if something goes wrong, particularly with an AI decision, it's the human that gets is at fault at the end of the day. So the outdoors wellness is just the tip of the iceberg. There are so many other elements underneath that will transform a business and basically improve the bottom line. And in the case of, say, the public sector, it's just going to increase productivity. May not be driven by profit margins per se, but but the productivity and the outputs for people will be increased significantly.
It's that sort of intangible.
Yes, absolutely.
I mean, it's funny when you really think about it. The only time I would say that in a work environment, I've been told by my employer to go outside and stay outside is a fire alarm test. That's the only time I've been directly instructed to go and do that. Well, kind of like in office jobs. Although that said, for many years I was a door knocker, a political organizer.
Right.
So I had a large part of my job which was in an office doing things. And I had another part of my job which was to go out and walk around the streets and knock on doors and kind of do that. And I did all sorts. I did it for like MPs. I did it during by-elections. I used to do it for the National Party. And it is interesting, the teams and the work that were done. Like the bonds. I mean, it's a more stressful thing, but it's interesting actually. That sort of the esprit de corps that kind of builds up when you're there and you're out and, like in all weathers and things like that. But apart from that, it is the fire alarm is the only time when you're really allowed to get away from your desk and go outside. The decision fatigue piece is really interesting as well, because when you look at the promise of efficiency in AI, And by no means is that the only measure that you should look at, I think, overall. But that's where a lot of people's heads are, especially in the public sector with constrained budgets and, everyone having to do more with less. And it's this thing of like, AI is going to bring the efficiency.
Yes.
And if it does, and it takes away a lot of tasks that you were doing before, that frees up time. But that time may be spent on doing more decision making, which comes with it a price. And I remember we were doing a training course with some people in the defence sector. And they were like, well, actually, I enjoy my tasks. I enjoy my monotonous task time because that allows me to kind of zone out and be super mindful and just do my task again and again and again. If I don't have that, I've only got like the strategic work, and that takes quite a big toll on my thinking, on my brain and my time, and I need to kind of do that. And actually, there's a counterbalance to be had here. And it seems that, we can't just do that one high values piece without that recharge, that reset. Yeah. I think, the other thing that I was very interested to hear you speak about before, and I think there is a perception with those who do not want to give this sort of thinking any time, that it's kind of a bit woo-woo. It's a little bit, oh, well, if it's not, like you said, it's a nice to have, do. Yeah. Do you need to take a dream catcher with, like all that kind of stuff. And we've had that in another context I'll tell you about in a minute. But with this, there's some pretty serious science underneath this as well. Yeah. Like, do you have like quantifiable sense of how long this takes or what it can do and how it can help recharge people?
Well, I mean, certainly just a 5-10 minute break can help to reset, de-stress you. Yeah. Because, the evidence points to the fact that, if you are stressed, your cortisol levels are high. Yeah. And actually you become far more reactive. And it really narrows your thinking. So if you think you're leading a team or you're making strategic decisions, if you're in that zone, you really don't want to be making key important decisions because you've basically done that. So even that 5-10 minute reset can have a huge impact to actually reduce that feeling of stress, for example. And even I think it was about 29 minutes can increase our productivity by 45%. Yeah. I mean, they're not small figures, the impact, but it's not a significant amount of time in the scheme of things. And, if you're actually outdoors having a conversation or doing something, having a conversation with a colleague or maybe taking a phone call, or you're doing some of your own strategic thinking, how are you going to solve this particular issue? It's not actually wasted time. And I think this is the perception people have, is the fact that it's wasting time, but actually you're not. You're recharging the brain, you're recharging your ability to focus and drive things forward, and to be able to perform at a much higher level. Yeah. I guess the comparison is, athletes, they train really hard, but they don't train 8 hours at a time. They give their bodies a bit of a break. Yeah. As a human being, we have to give our brains a break. Yeah. Otherwise we will burn out. And that is actually what's happening. Yeah. And all the evidence points to, senior decision makers, that they're leaving their jobs. There's a lot of global data indicating that senior leaders are because they are burnt out. And this is what's happening, this decision fatigue and constantly being driven. But people are afraid it looks like they're slacking by taking a step out for 5-10 minutes. But actually, it's a performance tool. It's
and I think AI and the world that we work in is kind of like AI and like technology product, if you will. Yes. And that is known for being like hyper paced, and it's all about reaction and all about you find this, you do that, and it's like very fast feedback cycles and stuff like that. And that can be great and that can be useful. You look at things like, some of the decentralized finance stuff. We were at a conference the other day looking at that. And again, when you look at things like cryptocurrencies and you're talking to people about, they're trading this or trading that, and yet they're on like, I don't know, 20 hours of a given day. Yeah. And it's just a lot. Talking to some of the people we kind of do, some of the people who've been in kind of like AI and computer for quite a long time, they, that sort of being driven by this product market fit and relentless cycle is worrying because, where's the deep thought gone? Like early AI used to be quite philosophical. And certainly now there's a lot of the barriers to AI developing are as they're hitting kind of what quite classic philosophy of mind issues. And it's kind of getting to the point where, it's gone that far, but to take the next leap, it needs kind of like a slower thought or maybe deeper thought to kind of get there. So I think things that kind of help promote that or force a change in perspective, I think is actually quite radical at a time where, we often overstate our short-term impact over long-term impact.
Yes.
So, like AI has arrived. The first thing was like, oh, AI is going to take my job. And then it kind of turned into, no, AI won't, but someone using AI will take your job. And actually, it won't take your job, and that person may take your job. But what will happen is there'll be another job there.
Yeah. And
the immediate fear of losing work isn't actually the fear, isn't actually where it is. It's actually your job will change forever. So it's not the loss of work immediately, it's the changing of work.
Yes.
That is really what's going on. But it's a very human thing to kind of look at the very near field impact of it. And with that, and then thinking about this idea of, the third branch of hybrid working, actually, it's a really nice time to be in the mix to kind of say, well, the future of work will be different. What is it that we can do differently that is to our net benefit, as opposed to, kind of working out a new cyber digital workhouse solution, which I'm sure there are those in this world would want to push us to. But, in terms of that, the whole idea that this is going on can help inform a conversation about where work could go is super cool. Are you so in the UK, are there many practitioners kind of doing this sort of piece, or is it global, or how does it fit together?
There are a few of us sort of nationally that embrace the outdoors and use the outdoors. It's used quite a lot by people for coaching these days.
Yeah.
Because it enables the coach and the coachee to have much deeper sort of conversations, more free flowing, getting to the root cause of issues more easily, that sort of thing, than this direct, eye contact conversation. So it does speed that up, certainly for that. Then there are, again, a smaller number of us who may use the outdoors to facilitate. So for example, taking a group, I tend to do a bit of a sandwich. We work indoors to begin with, work out what the questions are that we're trying to solve, strategically. Then we'll take the scene leaders out for the conversation outdoors where all the ideas are popping and everything, and then come back in to capture all of that and put a plan together. So we're keeping it at that strategic level, but we're using, as we say, the outdoors as that co-facilitator to do that. And then, there are one or two places that might be embracing the outdoors in their culture in an organisational setting, and reaping the rewards of that. But it's not huge. It's definitely not huge in the UK from from my knowledge. But then, I'm having to smirk because, LinkedIn is a brilliant place to be at times, but I never understand how these algorithms actually work.
Yeah.
It's just like, it's so random. But I put something out the other day, which was, it was an article, and the algorithms seemed to send it into these different people's places, which, and I got these wonderful messages back. Amazing. But they were global. Wow. It's like from people that were using the outdoors, using nature, getting businesses to sign up to using the outdoors. But it wasn't UK based. It was actually, I think the one that triggered it off was actually from the Netherlands.
Okay.
But then I had people connecting from America, and then another lady from Singapore. And it was just like the dots were connecting.
Yeah.
And actually, I never get excited on LinkedIn. But this was the one point I actually felt really connected and actually quite excited and thought, LinkedIn, you've actually done me a favour for once. It's just like, it's this love-hate relationship I have with it. But yeah, so it is there. And you know, when I did my research before bringing it into my work, I did find an awful lot that was going on in America, more so than over here. But then I did see great practitioners over here embracing it as well. And, you know, I've seen colleagues who particularly use the angle of that restoration piece by taking people outdoors for longer treks and things like even 2 or 3 day breaks where they are helping to restore that attention in our strategic leaders, senior leaders and everything. So it is lovely to see it globally. There is a degree of excitement when you see that, because I know when I changed the business a couple of years ago, I had this great ambition to create a movement, really quite literally. A movement to get people moving, get people in, whether it's the public sector, the private sector, actually moving in business, as it were, during the day and making it part of their everyday working, which was like it was the three prongs to the 3 branches to hybrid working. So I haven't quite managed that. It's a slow burn.
Well, you know, I mean, it's changing habits and changing. You know, it's a bit. At the moment, a lot of the work that we do in terms of technology, it so often comes back to, and you know, from government, local government, multinational, corporate, the amount of times the following sentence is said: "It's not the tech, it's the people." You know, and again, if you go back to like Peter Drucker in the 70s, it was culture eats breakfast, process for breakfast.
Culture eats strategy for breakfast.
Strategy for breakfast, yeah.
That's the one.
And it's like, so much of it boils down to that. And then, it kind of that point. I mean, we were talking the other day to the digital leaders folks who were talking about how the design of factories, like, so the workplace of, you know, kind of a couple hundred years ago, was entirely designed around the steam pump.
Right.
Now, when the steam pump was removed in favour of electricity, the layout of the factory didn't change overnight, but it did begin to change because you didn't need to have, because the mechanics of electricity are fundamentally different to those of steam pumps.
Yes.
So, you know, it wasn't that you'd have all of the like high critical work around the steam pump because that's where pressure was the highest. All of these things are kind of there, and I think, you know, you'll begin to see the effects of it, but it's almost like we can't, it's almost like that's too big a thought. It's too big a thing to kind of tackle off, so it's easier to look at, you know, the smaller chunks of it. But I do think something like this is worth definitely lobbying for, because you've got, you know, you have got an opportunity here again to like redefine and see how it fits together, and it is so different to the sorts of technology that we're seeing and kind of where things potentially could be punted. But
just link it. I'm sorry to interrupt. But there was something that you mentioned which was around the habit. Yeah. So I created a little mantra which is outdoors is a habit, and it is literally small step changes. Yeah. Because I mean the work that I've done in the NHS in primary care, for example, we were very much about the quality improvement process, which was small step changes lead to big impacts within the organisation. And it's the same with the outdoors. You know, we're not talking about massive amounts of time. We are talking about the incremental impact of small amounts of time outdoors on, yes, mental wellness, but actually also on that productivity and our thinking, our critical thinking skills, our ability to perform better, our ability to connect better. Just so, you know, culturally, we work more effectively as human beings, so we can complement our growing technology in AI, because, you know, the AI revolution is so exciting, but we mustn't lose our human cognitive skills along the way. And I do think that the two go hand in hand and complement one another in that regard.
I think there will be. I mean, in the way that, you know, kind of people say, oh, it could rewire brains and things like that. I think there have been points where, I mean, like reading definitely rewired the human brain.
Yeah.
But it just wasn't something that was recorded, thought of, or kind of, you know, spoken about. And there's a great quote about technology as something that will diminish, you know, man's faculty to remember, to debate, to discuss, to, you know, and it's really just a quote that's just slamming technology, and it's Socrates talking about writing. You know, you kind of, you see that sort of that loop again.
But then we have you know, if we use our cognitive skills, we can change that narrative, can't we? By actually making sure that those cognitive skills, the critical thinking, the creativity, you know, identifying the context and the consequences of making the decisions that AI has provided for us, you know, all the information, you know, those are processes that we have a choice to make. And we can either allow technology to take that responsibility, but yet the accountability still stays with us, or we can say, okay, this is brilliant. We've got all this. It's really sped things up. We've got all this information. Now, as a human being, I need to take into account the culture that we've got, the context that we're in, all those human facets, and apply the right information and make the right decision. And that's our choice at the end of the day.
That's nice. It's nice. You know, it's like personal sovereignty, isn't it? It's, yeah, this is, but that's a very important message when I think people are in a position of, you know, there's a lot of, you know, the FUD, the fear, the uncertainty and the doubt and the, you know, and also just a tremendous sense of overwhelm that, you know, we are powerless in the face of this sort of onslaught of technology, geopolitics, everything happening. And, you know, I think in taking a moment to just reflect that, no, there's still a lot of agency. And, you know, perhaps definitely that sort of outside space being something that grounds us and takes us, you know, kind of puts us in our place almost.
It puts life in perspective.
Yeah. It's good. So one thing that just to come back to really was this. So a lot of the people we work with are kind of in care in the broadest sense.
Yeah.
And you were talking about the restorative impact of kind of going away and like from a business point of view and things like that. We've also started seeing a rise of people talking about natural prescribing. So, you know, kind of it just being, you know, again, it's kind of like the permission to just go out and do something. And this sort of, I can't remember the exact timings of it, but it's like if you spend number underneath like 60 minutes outside with your hands in soil, your serotonin levels begin to rise. It's like this sort of... So actually, for a lot of people who, you know, perhaps older populations, but this social isolation piece, being prescribed something that gets them outside, gets them working in soil, in, you know, kind of with the land, with others, is actually something that potentially could save the health service and the adult social care service. Billions cumulatively. But again, I think it comes back to your point of, it's not like a do it today and you'll see the results tomorrow. No. It's do it today and like longitudinally, it will begin to have this massive uplift.
Absolutely.
But it's kind of, perhaps it's been a bit lost. Perhaps it's kind of not there. But I just think it's, you know, there seems to be so many benefits to not think about it. It seems almost insane to ignore it in favour of, you know, kind of more rigid ways of thinking.
Yes, and what you mentioned there about that nature prescribing, just thinking back to, you know, I mentioned the LinkedIn article. I think it was very much on that message. It was about the health service and everything, but it was an American article.
Oh, interesting.
And it was all about how the impact of nature, you know, how it could help, particularly with health. And again, it was about making sure that it was accessible outdoors as opposed to the inaccessible, which was where, you know, my messaging around, I live in the most beautiful part of the world, you know, in Northumberland, but not everybody does. So that shouldn't be seen as a barrier. The fact that just step out your door and see what is there. You know, people connecting outdoors really does help with that isolation. It does help with the well-being. it has so many positives that we can't really ignore it. And as you say, talking about the National Health Service and the costs, it is about preventative actions rather than the reactivity of things. So going back to, if we invest money into these sort of the education of people to how they, the outdoors can benefit them in so many different realms of life, then that in the long term will actually save the public purse strings an awful lot of money at the end of the day, whether that's with health, whether that's with social elements, even maybe in education.
It's a
if you think about the the Scandinavian countries, I mean, they spend so much time outdoors from such a young age and everything. But there again, I start thinking about everybody seems to be paranoid about health and safety over here in the UK compared to some of these other countries. And maybe that prevents a lot of the things actually happening. I don't know. It might be a controversial statement, that one, but there we go.
It could be. We've Patrick last time said he wanted to destroy Excel. So a good controversial statement. It's but it is that thing of get out from behind the desk and explore a fresh perspective. A fresh perspective, which is a good, kind of like a good way of thinking about it and see what happens. I guess it's it's got that power to it. It's a new thing.
And all you need is a pair of flat shoes.
Yeah. I mean,
you don't even need the kit.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? It's not like you need the hiking gear or the walking boots or anything. It's just like a pair of comfy flat shoes, and you can walk down the street to your local park or the river. Yes, if you can get further afield, that's wonderful. But don't make that become the barrier.
Yeah, I think so. It seems that there's a sense of, you can get going on this. You can do it very quickly.
Yes.
You need, you can start with a small thing that then builds up, and it's more the consistency over time that gives you it.
Habit.
That is that. And if someone's kind of thinking, well, this is something that I like the sound of, and I want to do more, especially if they're kind of like perhaps sitting within their business, within their company, within their, kind of like organization. What are the things that they can do like tomorrow? That's just try that and see how it goes. Like less kind of as themselves, but perhaps for their team or something like that.
Quite a few very simple steps you can do. The day of technology, how many phone calls do we take which are actually on mobiles? Instead of being sat at your desk, get up, walk around, go out the door, office door, and take the phone call whilst you are just walking around the block. Instead of having your coffee and chat at break time, sat indoors, in the kitchen, whatever, get a thermal cup and, again, just go for a walk for five minutes. Have that one-to-one conversation, or even the challenging, that's another one, the challenging conversation. Have that walking side by side outdoors. You've just removed all the barriers of the eye contact and everything, and do that. Have a meeting. Around a table in a park. I can just imagine some of your listeners thinking, what planet is this woman on? But actually, it works. And you know what? People do it, and suddenly the meeting comes alive. Ideas are popping again, and there's energy. Because that's the other thing, the energy you get from being outdoors rather than sat in the same office all the time. So they are literally small step changes. They're not going to, break the mold overnight. But what you're doing is bringing these micro habits into the office, which can transform how people actually are. Whether that's their ideas, their thinking, their creativity, their productivity, their engagement, and it's actually going to just improve the whole culture within the organisation.
That sounds amazing. There's one more though that you've missed out.
I have.
You have, absolutely, which is to call you. Jane Fisher
well,
at Fresh Perspectives.
I'm not a very good salesperson.
You can't not. And I think that sort of thinking, taking it, letting it percolate, and then going, right, how are we going to use and deploy this is so important.
Yeah, you're right. a lot of the work I do is about trying to facilitate this. So although I love sort of doing the coaching side and the strategic thinking side with clients, you know, taking the leadership teams out and exploring you know, how they can grow their organization, solving problems, all that side of things. You know, one of the other things I would do, I actually did create a 90-day challenge which would transform an organization's approach by these small habits. And I created 2 elements. One was for a leader and the other was for the organization itself. And it was just a gentle introduction where within 90 days it would reset how they saw the outdoors.
Oh, that's amazing.
Yeah, and you know, show the impact, because, you know, as I said at the beginning, you know, I'm driven by the science, I'm driven by the data.
Yeah.
So for me, you know, it's about showing the baseline to begin with, and further down the line what the actual impact is. You know, we don't do this for fun.
Yeah.
This is about impact. This is about productivity. It's about growth in whatever organisation they are. So yes, if anybody would like to discover more, they're very welcome to. Make a contact.
Yeah, no, it sounds, it sounds like something that if you're even half thinking about it, you should definitely pick up the phone. But not before popping out for a walk around the block while you do it.
Yeah, think about it. In fact, no, you can ring me whilst you're walking around the block. Yeah.
Just go for it.
Yeah, because, I mean, it's interesting because some of the coaching I do, I still do outside, but the client may be miles and miles away because they're on a phone. I'm on a phone. We walk around different areas, but we're still benefiting using the technology and the outdoors to have that conversation.
Oh, that is perfect.
Yeah.
That is how
I tell you, hand and glove.
Yeah, that's it. We will, that's it. That's the thought to finish on, I think. Yeah. That is brilliant. Well, Jane Fisher, thank you so much for coming along today and talking to us and sharing, you know, your flavour of innovation, which is, you know, really, I think with everything going on, it's kind of, its time is approaching. So, thank you very much.
Okay. My contact details, I guess you put at the end of it.
Oh, I don't know how that bit works.
I've no idea. That's a technical question.
Yeah. That's the bit that we'll...
But I am on LinkedIn as well if people want to connect as well.
It's quite, we'll tag you up in the old, in the comments.
I've no idea how it works. Just give me the human being.
Yeah, that's it.
Thank you, Adam. I've really enjoyed it. Thank you so much.
Good. Yeah. And that's it.